we're going to go into the question and answer period, if you have any questions that you would like. So, as I mentioned previously, this annual meeting is being live streamed to members across the province. And I want to welcome those members, some of whom are attending individually, and others who, through their employer connections, have gotten together and they're attending it as a group, as a PD session. These members, you are able to participate in the question period by emailing all small letters, ahmed.ocswssw@gmail.com. So if you have any questions about any of the reports, please put them in now. I'll repeat that, ahmed.ocswssw@gmail.com. Once an email is received here, it will be read by one of college staff, Pat Lieberman. I'll take questions from the floor beginning now, and periodically we'll check in to see if there are any questions from Pat. If there are more email questions than time permits, college staff will respond to the questions via email within the next 2 weeks. In order to accommodate questions from as many members as possible that are here today, we would ask that you limit yourself to one question only. Follow-up questions may be accommodated at the end of the question period, time permitting. I now invite questions, and there are microphones, so we would ask you to go to a microphone so that our people that are coming in through live stream can hear you, as well as others. So I will go to invite questions. Do we have any questions? Okay, we'll start over here.
Good morning. My name is Susan Mintz. I'm a social worker, and I was very interested in hearing Lisa's comment regarding the complexity of disciplinary situations that you've encountered, and the fact that the situations seem to be becoming more complex. And what was triggered for me was a question about whether we as a profession need to look at enhancing some of our professional development and or working with our universities in order to assure that we are proactively helping young social workers and not so young social workers to know some of the minefields that they can encounter and to help them strategize to avoid the complexities that you described. So my question is this something that could happen? And do you see it as being part of the role of the college to help social workers to address issues that could become disciplinary in nature?
I'll ask Lise to start the response for that.
I did figure I wouldn't sit down because probably there would be some questions. So I'm very glad that you started things off with such an excellent question. And I think what your question does for me is highlight a few of the important things that the college is doing in order to promote ethical and professional practice. So there are the proactive activities of the college, and then there are the reactive, and I mean reactive in the positive sense of the word, activities of the college, which are the complaints and discipline processes which I spoke to. And we very much see the relevance and importance of stakeholder relationships, whether that be with educators or whether that be with our regulatory colleges, colleagues across Canada and North America, to even understand, for example, that generally speaking, regulatory bodies, and not just in our professions, are experiencing a rise in the seriousness and complexity of complaints. I think what this does do is highlight that one of the challenges for regulators in determining the source of, why might we be getting more complaints or more serious and complex complaints, because it isn't a nice, clear-cut, linear kind of answer necessarily. So professional practice, as I spoke to, does a very important job of being a resource to supporting members in their practice to ensure that they're able to ask questions about the standards of practice and how they might apply to various practice situations and scenarios. Their presentations do a similar thing. So their outreach to social work and social service work students and their relationships with educators help them to ensure that as we continually have new graduates coming and registering with the college, they understand what the college's mandate is and the important role that it plays. We have put a lot of efforts in 2017 and continue in 2018 to working with educators and fostering those relationships. The other piece, and you asked such a good question, you sort of can cover all of these different things, but the other important thing that the college does through its continuing competence program is ensure that all members remain competent. They don't just register and are newly qualified, but they continue to learn and grow throughout their careers. And so all of those important pieces are something that the college emphasizes in its relationships with educators. At the same time, I think it's very important for the college to be aware of the limits of its mandate. And so the college relies on ensuring that those educators are preparing social work and social service work students for registration with the college and for practice. I hope that answers your question.
We have a question over here now.
Hi. This makes it so clear the importance and the clear objective of the college. The question I have really is around access and the theme of breaking down barriers. The fees for the college go up, but when you look at the salaries across the board for social workers and social service workers, accessibility becomes an issue because of the cost of the fees. Many agencies don't cover the cost of the fees that you have to pay, and in many of the roles that do pay higher, like CAS, so you're not required to have a registration with the college. What's being done to reduce the fees, and why are the fees not being looked at? Because I feel like that would increase accessibility for people, especially people who are graduating and don't have access to register with the college. I think that those that aren't registered but still practice as social workers often do a disservice to our profession, and it's difficult, and it's not being monitored as it can because it's just such a big problem. But the difficulty is that, again, it's not a requirement. You look at nurses who make way more than social workers. Their fees are $100 cheaper than ours per year.
All right. Thank you. Really appreciate that question. I'm going to ask Lise to start off answering that question and reviewing for us all of the things that we do that council does in order to arrive at those fees.
So this may seem a little counterintuitive, but thank you very much for that question, because I think you raised a number of very important issues. One of them has to do with the role of a regulatory body and the importance of fees. And so the council, as part of the budget process and the cash flow projections that happen every year, looks very carefully at fees in making a recommendation for the coming year. And we're very aware, and you probably recognize these words from some of our past communications around fees, that fee increases are rarely popular with members. But what the council has to do, and what the college as a whole has to do, is always keep its public protection mandate in mind. And regulation comes at a cost. And there are many things that I spoke about in my remarks that have to do with the cost of regulating professions. And so, you also spoke to the issue of title protection. So by being a member of the college, only members of the college are able to use any of the protected titles: social worker, social service worker, registered social service worker. So, those out there who may be referring to themselves as social workers or social service workers are not doing so. And one of the many matters that the college involves itself with is following up on title protection matters that comes to its attention. But I digress a little bit in saying that, coming back to my previous words, fees are being looked at, but no, fees are not being reduced, and part of that relates to the cost of regulation. And again, I spoke to to some of the activities that the college is required to do as part of its public protection mandate, which include complaints and discipline processes. I've just spoken to the fact that the complexity, seriousness, and numbers of complaints, as well as disciplinary processes, are on the rise, not just for us, but for regulatory bodies in all jurisdictions, and certainly across North America. And that comes at a significant cost, but I'm sure you would agree with me that it's not possible to, for the college to ignore these matters. It's extremely important for the college to ensure that it has these processes in place. A lot of our other activities also come at a cost, but I can assure you that the college is extremely careful in how it uses resources, and it's why we go through this very rigorous process every year. And I hope that answers your question about fees.
Thank you, Lise. Pat, do we have any questions from the people coming in? Not yet? Okay. All right. We'll have another question over here.
Hi. I just had a quick question just about, this is dating me a bit, but I remember in practice I was able to, when I first started out, I was able to call into the college if I had any questions, consult on any issues coming up in the field. I'm just wondering, with the complexity that you described in the cases that are now being seen, have you seen a rise in people calling in for consultation? And do you foresee any issues with capacity in the college being able to respond to anyone calling in?
I'll ask Lise to respond to that one.
I think I highlighted one of the important milestones for the college this year was going over 20,000 members. And so we really expect that we're going to have increases in numbers across the board once we have 20,000 members. That's a lot of members. So I think I really appreciate you raising this question because it allows me to highlight that proactive aspect of the college's work, and that's supporting the vast majority of members who practice competently and ethically, and sometimes require some support from our very able professional practice team to understand how the standards of practice apply to various challenges that they might be facing. So not only do we have a very user-friendly and accessible website on which you can access a whole range of resources, whether that be past newsletters, practice notes, practice guidelines, of course the standards of practice and the continuing competence program documents. But we also have live consultations where any member of the college and also members of the public and employers can call the professional practice team and speak to one of our staff who will help them to explore the various issues involved in whatever dilemma they might be facing and how the standards of practice apply. And yes, I'm happy to say that we have an increase in those calls. We don't have a capacity issue, but I will say that those standards, those calls are increasing. So we, professional practice team responded to over 3,000 practice inquiries in 2017, which was an increase of, I believe, it's dangerous to be quoted when it's being, webcast, but I believe that's an increase of well over 16% from the previous year. I won't wait for someone to correct me on the number. Don't quote me on the percentage, but there's certainly a significant increase in professional practice inquiries, and we're very proud of the ability and responsiveness of our professional practice department to help you with those inquiries. If you have never had contact with professional practice, that may be fine, but I encourage you to think about it the next time you're facing an ethical dilemma. You wonder, why doesn't the college have resources on such and such? Why is it that the standards of practice don't address such and such? I think you'll be very pleasantly surprised to find, first of all, the college likely does have a resource on it somewhere, and the professional practice team can help you to access that resource easily. And also, the standards of practice apply to practice scenarios that you're facing in your practice. They're written in such a way as to apply to the very diverse settings and areas of practice in which all of you work. So thanks for that question. It was not a plant.
Pat, I think we have a question from our people coming in live stream. Is that correct?
Yes, thank you. Nobody can hear me. Is it on? This is a logistic question from one of our live stream participants. There was no advance registration for live streaming this year, and I couldn't find where I was supposed to give my name and email. How does the college acknowledge I am participating in this day?
Okay.
Do you want to respond to that?
No, you can respond to that.
So, you've stumped me. But I know that I'm supposed to know the answer to that question. So rather than trying to find our communications manager, Sarah Chaudhry, who is responsible for all of the excellent organization, maybe actually I will ask Sarah to respond to that question if she has easy access to a mic to explain. Thank you, Sarah. I'm not sure if you heard the question, so maybe I'll get Pat to repeat it.
There was no advance registration for live streaming this year, and I couldn't find where I was supposed to give my name and email. How does the college acknowledge I am participating in this day?
Thank you. Great question. So this year was a little bit different for the live stream event. The live stream is hosted directly on our website. We were having technical issues this morning. There should be a form that appears on the live stream webpage. You'll be able to fill out your name, email, address, and then you'll click submit, and then that's where you'll be able to see the live stream event. We collect that data. So at some point next week, we'll be revising everybody's email addresses that they inputted into onto the website, and we'll be sending you a post-event survey as well as a link to access your certificate of participation. For those who are attending in person, you'll also be receiving your post-event survey by email next week and a copy of your certificate of attendance. So hopefully that answers your question.
Okay. And if there are any issues and that doesn't work for you, please let us know. We'll go back with you on it. And could we there's another question here. Okay, you can come now.
Hello, thank you. So this year, the registration process was updated to include, there's a new question about asking if applicants have a physical or mental health condition that may impact their ability to practice safely. And I'm wondering what the college is doing around to make sure we're not discriminating against folks who are coming with lived experiences into the profession, and how we're making sure, for instance, someone might register and say, no, they don't have a physical or mental health condition. Something might change later in their life. And I'm just wondering what we're doing to make sure that we can be accommodating to that as a profession. That's the bread and butter of what we do.
Okay. Good question. I'm going to ask Lise to answer that question and also talk about how it's a familiar question of sorts with other regulators.
Thank you very much. And I'm not surprised that you raised this question. I'm very glad that you raised this question because I think it's very important. And it really points to one of the challenges that we have sometimes as the regulator, communicating with our members and with other stakeholders about matters that have been that we're working on. And so an amendment to a registration regulation, we made efforts to explain this in some of our communications around the particular issue that you're raising, is a long process. So the discussions that Council had about amendments to the registration regulation began more than 2 years prior to actually 3 years prior to the amendments coming into force. So I want to highlight that process, that length of that process. And there were a number of matters when we sent out the e-bulletin to all members about the registration regulation. We highlighted a number of the important changes. And this particular amendment that you're referring to is not a new requirement. It is an improvement to existing wording in the registration regulation. So I think that's the most important thing to highlight at the top. This is also a requirement that is in keeping and consistent with what other regulators require as well. Because remember again, and I really hate to repeat myself in the same words, so I try to sort of flip the words around a little bit, but we have an important public protection mandate here. All of you as members of the college, when the public sees a member of the college, they are relying on the college fulfilling its mandate and ensuring that all members of the college are professional, ethical, qualified, and accountable. So being a regulated professional comes with certain obligations and sometimes a requirement to disclose information that might be different from another setting or situation. And that's because, as members of the college, you're providing services to vulnerable client populations, and it's important that you be able to practice safely and competently. So what we now have is an improvement on the question on the application form to require applicants to the college, so this is not part of the renewal process, this is applicants to the college, to provide information as to whether or not they suffer from a condition or disorder that in their estimation they believe may impact their ability to practice in a safe manner. So it's a self-disclosure. It's important that it's a point in time and that members make that assessment to the best of their ability. We have carefully considered, and you can imagine a registration regulation amendment, a registration regulation goes through multiple levels of review and consideration, and we're very conscious of the fact that this is sensitive information that we're gathering. We're not asking for every member of the college to indicate any condition or disorder that they may have experienced in their life, but at the time of registration, do they suffer from a condition or disorder that they feel may impact their ability to practice in a safe manner? So when the college does receive that information, it handles it in accordance with best practices for dealing with such information. That means we recognize it's highly sensitive, it's confidential information, and it is handled on that basis extremely carefully.
Pat, are there any more questions at this time? No? Okay. Over here, we have one more. Yeah, we have time for a few more, so please come up to the mic.
Just one more question. Go back to the previously, there was a lady asked about the membership fee, $310, right? It's $310. As you know, for our profession at the college, people who registered in this college has a various level of degree. Social service worker usually has a diploma, bachelor degree, social worker, and MSW. And obviously, even though we all work in the social work field, our salaries are different based on our education level. Mm-hmm. And as you know, for social service worker who started with entry level, they really don't get paid a lot, maybe, I don't know, $20 an hour, $25 an hour. But for MSW, clinical social workers, I work at the UHN, Toronto Western Hospital. We started with around $40, and if I do private practice, it's obviously a bit more money. Though I don't think it will be fair for someone, especially someone who just graduated and started an entry-level job, pays the same amount of money as someone who already established in the field. And I'm wondering if the college would consider to have this special, I don't know if it's special discount or if there's a different price category for someone who does clinical work or who just be in the entry level. Thank you.
Good question. Thanks for that question. I'm going to ask.
And even $310 for someone working in the hospital is still a lot of money. It's like,
I'm going to ask Lise and or Shelley to talk about that and also highlight our new grad fee.
I noticed that I don't get applause for my answers, but I won't take that personally. I think you do raise a very important issue and consideration, and I can say in the history of our college, Council has looked very carefully at the issue of equity between the two professions. We regulate both professions. There are shared standards of practice for the two professions, and there is an effort, a consistent effort to acknowledge that while there are differences certainly between the two professions, they are equal in terms of regulation. And I guess what comes along with that, and this is not to minimize in any way some of the differences in the employment market for social workers and social service workers, but it costs the same to regulate a social worker or a social service worker. So we're not a membership organization such as an association where fees may be determined on a number of different bases. We regulate all of our members, social workers and social service workers, in the same way, and those costs remain the same regardless of whether they see 2 clients a month or they see 50 clients a week. And so it's important, I think, for us to continually ensure that you're aware that while we recognize and we're very aware of the challenges that you may experience in your various practice settings, that our mandate is to regulate the two professions, and that is a conscious decision around fees. Oh, right. And I did want to highlight that one of the things that Council decided a number of years ago was to assist new graduates from both social work and social service work programs to register with the college. So applicants who register by December 31st of the year that they graduate are eligible for a reduced fee, not only for that first year, but for the 2 subsequent years. And this is one of the ways that we can acknowledge, we do acknowledge and have for many years now, the challenge that new graduates face as they get established in the workforce. So although it doesn't necessarily fully address the issues that you're raising, and we recognize those challenges, it does assist new graduate members, and I reported that we are very pleased with the number of new graduates who registered in 2017.
Hi, we have another question over here.
Good morning. My name is Karen Walker, and I work at George Brown College. A question. Could you talk a little bit about the application for the Professional Development Fund or reference? Are there examples of situations or proposals that have been approved on the website?
Okay, I'll ask Lise to give you some info on that.
Well, I'm scanning the audience for our OASW, Ontario Association of Social Workers colleagues, who have been doing an exemplary job of regulating administering the Social Worker and Social Service Worker Professional Development Fund. And the college, along with the association, some other stakeholders, has been on the steering committee of the fund, which is now a well-oiled machine, and that there was an increase in the amount that members can access to as part of the fund. And what I can say, although there are links on our website, easy access from our website to the fund and to the association's pages about the fund. So it's really not hard to find that information. But what I can say, and I think is fair to say, is that the challenge is getting people to apply for the fund. It is not difficult because as a group, social workers and social service workers, once they actually apply, are doing the vast majority of things that they do would be funded by the fund. So I think if you can spread the word amongst yourselves that the challenge is not getting what your valuable educational activity covered. The challenge is actually getting people to make sure that they apply for the fund and make sure that we use it well, because it's there to be used.
We have time for up to 2 more questions, so we'll start over here.
Yes, good morning. My name is Mario Spiller, and I'm a social work psychotherapist in private practice. And in keeping with the theme of breaking down barriers, can you make a brief statement about the college, what the college is currently, how the college is currently handling and is planning to handle technological and international accessibility to working with clients outside of Ontario and or Canada?
Sure. I'll ask Lise to talk about that.
So I spoke, thank you for your question. I think the issue of technology and its impact on practice is one that we've been aware of for many years. And it's actually a really interesting issue because it highlights one of the reasons that the standards of practice are written in the way that they are. Because standards of practice are important in that they govern all, they set out minimum standards for all areas of practice, and they have to be written in a way where they're not instantly out of date. And what better issue than technology to be instantly out of date? And so for that reason, the standards of practice, which apply to the various challenging technology-related situations that you may be facing in your practice, are well covered by the standards of practice. But what we've done is develop a number of resources, primarily practice notes, but also Q&As on the college website that address various aspects of technology and its impact on practice. So if you haven't already seen those, and there has been special communications, e-bulletins to members around the impact of technology on practice. It's a big area. It's an ongoing and continually evolving area. And one of the reasons that we continue to publish practice notes in this area is because they're kind of nimble. We don't get to use the word nimble at a regulatory college very often, but practice notes are a nimble way to address some of the different scenarios that you might be facing in your practice and to help you to understand how the standards relate to technology and technology in your practice.
Thank you all very much for your questions and your participation. I'm now going to call on Shelley to conclude the meeting.
Yes, thank you all for your questions and for being so engaged. So this now concludes the business to be conducted at the 18th annual meeting. Thank you for attendance and participation. The meeting is now adjourned. Thank you very much.